what leadership problems do we solve with our leadership development? Well, in the simplest terms, the context of this is more often than not, our experience is that a leader, rightly so, is promoted into a position, whether that's on a senior leadership team or whether it's part of a board of directors. The reality is that up until that point, they probably haven't had any leadership development directly. So nobody's actually told them what it is to be a leader or how to lead. So we work with the new leader, the director, the executive, the senior leader, to develop how they can build that level of influence across the organization, what their profile of leadership is, how they communicate, what their behaviors are. And together, as they start to develop that understanding, we'll shift their leadership dial to a positive area where they can have a really good influence across the organization. With any business, there is an operating rhythm, or what I would term as the business rhythm. This means that for senior leaders, at some point, they're going to need to sit down together. So you're going to have a weekly meeting. How do you turn up in a weekly meeting? How do you run the weekly meeting? What's the context of the weekly meeting? You'll then probably have daily huddles where department heads will bring their teams together to determine what's going on. And then actually, there's going to be the quarterly off-site. So what happens when the board or the senior leadership team come together and have conversations? So a lot of businesses are kind of like anti-meetings, where actually the point for us with any leader is to develop an ability to communicate effectively and efficiently. And in order to do that, you've got to have effective and efficient business rhythm. And that means that we've got to sit down and actually discuss certain aspects of the business from a day-to-day basis to weekly to monthly to quarterly. I often get asked, what is the difference between a first-time leader, so your emergent leader in your business, and maybe that seasoned executive? Well, more often than not, it's pretty simple. An emergent leader, someone that you're investing in your business, is probably someone that hasn't really developed fully as a leader. And so what we're able to do in that case is to help shape the leader that they want to become, and indeed that the organization needs. The interesting point is when we start looking at senior leaders, those that have been around a bit, well, often you'll come across the fact that they may well have bad habits. They may well have a very particular way of handling themselves. Now, let's be really brutally clear. We live in an ever-changing world, and leadership development has to go with those changes. And so if we're going to work with a senior leader, then we need to establish what is their practice right now. Does it work? Is it still relevant? Do we need to help them develop better, more efficient, more professional, more performance-related approaches? Now, that might sound a little bit highfalutin if you're a leader listening to this, but you'll know yourself whether or not your style of leadership right now is having an impact on the organization, or whether it's having a poor impact on the organization, in which case these are areas that we can help. Leadership is intrinsic in the development of a team. And in order to build high performance teams, we've got to bring that level of understanding, to the team holistically. So how does team members turn up? What's the level of engagement? Our approach to building a high performance team is one of actually looking for the performance markers. Where are the opportunities in order to develop that level of performance within the business? One of the ways that we do this is we build with the leader the focus on objective and key results. So we'll look at building objectives in terms of where they want to get to, but then we'll set the metrics, the clear, measurable outcomes of what success looks like. Communication always comes up when we start to look towards creating a high performance team. So how do we communicate more effectively? There are a raft of different areas and focuses and methodologies that we'll bring to the mix in terms of actually helping with improving communication in that respect. And then there's also the fact that many teams, not through any fault of their own, but just through the process that they've been used to, the way in which they do business, the maybe resistance to change is they need aligning. And so we'll bring a team together and create a level of alignment. So there's an understanding of the individuals in the team. There's an understanding of the leadership in the team. There's an understanding of the organization. And then there's an understanding of the stakeholders, who the team is really, serving, whether that's customers, key stakeholders, or whatever. And through that alignment, we get a better focus in terms of the direction that needs to go. Ultimately, vastly improving performance. One thing that often comes up as a question is handling of conflict and where there may be underperformance. I live in a world where, for me personally, as a coach and with the organisations and the teams and the boards that I'm working with, we operate with healthy candour. So we will look at, saying what needs to be said, being confident that what is said around the table is absolutely appropriate, but it's not left unsaid. There's nothing worse and more damaging to any team than the water cooler conversations. So to overcome the water cooler conversations, you've got to sit down and you've got to have the tough conversations. You've got to have the tough, chats to make sure that we're actually, all pointing and performing in the right direction. If it's somebody that's underperforming, then we'll be left with options in terms of, well, how do we address that? What do we do? That might be a bit of an internal mentoring program. It could be, having a conversation with the leader, the line manager. In some instances, I have to say, it might be that you have to take the tough decisions of moving them from the team. But whatever we do, the easiest way to sum this up is we don't shy away from those conversations, and we will have them directly with you and support you in having those conversations within the team. Communication always comes up, and it is key in terms of influence. So as a leader, how do you communicate? One aspect that is often the case is, the smile you wear or don't wear can have a massive influence on the team. If you come in and you've got a fairly stern look, then, don't be surprised if the team run for cover. If you come in smiling, don't be surprised if the team are engaging. But the overarching focus here is to recognize and remember that communication is the response you get. So effective communication, and you'll pick this up as a theme in this conversation, effective communication is absolutely key. So we'll help uncover what effective communication looks like. We live by what we call the platinum rule. And the platinum rule really just states that you treat people as they want and need to be treated. That has a significant impact, but it comes with its own challenges, and we'll guide and help you through those challenges. One of the key aspects of our leadership development is making sure that as a board, we come together. Now, it may well be that whilst we might work with you individually in terms of the leadership development, or you may be on the executive program, the reality of this is we will almost certainly at some point have to do a board alignment, which is the whole premise of bringing the board together. So there's a level of interaction, there's an understanding of trust as a foundation of the conversation. And when we talk about trust, by the way, we term it as a vulnerability of trust. It's knowing that you can turn up and say something and you might be wrong, or you may have doubts, but you say it and know that even if it is wrong, you're not going to be thrown to the wolves, but rather you're going to be congratulated for actually raising the concern or raising the point, and actually knowing that that is a direct contribution in terms of vulnerability of trust. We're going to move away from fear of conflict towards healthy conflict, or it's often referred to as radical candor. And the easiest way to look at that is it's kind of like, you're not necessarily going to agree with everything that goes on the table, and you might piss people off, but you might piss people off because you give a shit. And that's really important to remember. Excuse the expletives, but it's an easy way to really give that, the emphasis that it requires. Ultimately, bringing the board together, creating the rules of the game, understanding how we operate around the table as a team in order to then create a really, truly healthy organization. That's our approach. So a leadership development program, generally speaking, you're looking at a few months, a year maybe, to actually start to shift the dial quite significantly. Beyond that is obviously the opportunity to then develop in the wider context. So whilst we'll sit with you in terms of helping to develop the leadership, one of the key aspects of our whole approach is we're not there just for project work. In developing you as a leader, what we uncover and unlock is one key aspect is the methodology and the ethics behind leadership in your organization. And what that actually means is, as an organization, you will start to focus on the key aspects of all leadership, which is to unlock and uncover fresh leadership, thus building, sustainability, emergent leadership within the business and longevity. So you're able to develop leaders from the bottom. We often refer to it as the leader program. So how, as a leader, do you then become, efficient in developing other leaders? And that's where our program actually can then start to really morph into a long-term leadership program with you and the organization to make sure that there is a long process and development and structured process in terms of how we develop leadership going forward. So a couple of really important points that we're often asked is kind of like, it's all very well talking about the leadership development side of life, but it feels as though it's, how do you measure it? And also the return on investment. Well, in the first context, we do a bit of benchmarking. So we'll do a 360 leadership assessment with the individual. Now, the real joy of this leadership assessment is it's not done by us. It is in part filled out by the individual, but they send it out to their colleagues and peers. And their colleagues and peers will comment anonymously. Then, periodically going forward, within a couple of months, a quarter, 6 months, we send it out again. And we can actively start to see where the dial is moving in terms of the individual's leadership. And that's really important so that we've got an element of benchmarking in leadership. And we focus on the key aspects that are truly important to the organization and the individual. Insofar as the return on investment, again, it really does boil down to the efficiencies and the effectiveness of the individual. Now, one of the things that we know empirically from not only the 360 leadership tests that we've done, but when we start to look at, measuring the key metrics, and let's be clear, one of them is financial return. In every instance, we see an uptick and the dial shift towards a greater financial return within the leadership program. The leadership program, in terms of whether or not it is something that's customizable, is absolutely on a case-by-case basis. And what I mean by that is, well, the easiest way to get started is to have a complimentary session with us, where we'll sit down and we'll determine, the baseline of where your leadership is. We won't do the 360 at this point, but we'll spend time understanding you. The reality is, because we coach, we're not actually just applying tools and strategies and theory. We're working with you as an individual to determine what good looks like for you and how you benefit as a leader. So yes, in short, our leadership development programs are 100% customizable because every single one of them is different. In the leadership program, it's often asked in terms of, do I need to make sure I've got support from around the table, from my leadership, from my chair or the CEO? Well, in the very first instance, 100% you do. But we haven't come across a case where we've entered into an agreement with someone because one of their leaders feels actually what we've got to do here is remedial action, where we're trying to fix something that's broken. This is about development. It's about understanding the individual and how we unlock that potential. And in every case, we'll have a conversation with the decision maker to ensure that that is absolutely crystal clear. We're not interested in remedial action and short-term relationships, trying to fix stuff which someone perceives as broken. We'll make sure that we're really clear that this is a development program. and that everybody is bought into the process.